"You're supposed to be dead," said the Mafia boss. She replied, "I am." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. A cold gust of wind swept through the narrow alley as Elena stumbled through the foggy night, her heels clicking unevenly against the cracked pavement. She had been walking for hours, trying to clear her mind, trying to forget the gnawing emptiness that followed her every step. She couldn't shake the memory of the bullet that had torn through her chest just weeks ago, her body left for dead on the cold concrete. But here she was, alive, breathing, and now, hunted. The sounds of the city were distant, muffled by the fog that clung to the streets. The night was heavy with the weight of her thoughts. She could still feel the cold metal of the gun pressed against her skin, the sharp crack of the shot echoing in her mind. She had been so sure it was the end, so sure that this time, there would be no coming back. But something had changed. She had woken up in a strange place, disoriented, her wounds miraculously healed, her body reanimated like something out of a nightmare. She was supposed to be dead. Yet here she was. As she walked, her hand instinctively brushed against the small silver locket around her neck, the only thing that had survived the attack. Her fingers trembled as she recalled the face of the man who had saved her. Victor Moretti, the Mafia boss. She didn't know how or why he had intervened, but she knew one thing for certain. He was no ordinary man. He had power, influence, and a dangerous world of secrets wrapped around him. And now, she was part of that world, whether she liked it or not. She hadn't asked for this life. She had been content, living on the edge, taking what she could get, doing what she had to survive. But when Victor found her that night, lying in her own blood, something inside him snapped. Something in him wanted her alive. Elena still didn't understand why. The door to her apartment creaked as she pushed it open, stepping into the dimly lit hallway. The walls seemed to close in around her, a reminder of the life she used to know, a life that felt like a distant dream now. She hadn't even unpacked her things after the attack. The old, familiar apartment felt foreign to her now, as if she no longer belonged here, as if she no longer belonged anywhere. But she wasn't alone. She could feel it, the eyes watching her from the shadows. She wasn't sure who was out there, but she could feel their presence. And then, there he was, Victor Moretti, standing in the doorway, his dark eyes locked onto hers with a cold intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "I told you," he said, his voice low, commanding. "You're supposed to be dead." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of his words, the accusation in them. He wasn't just talking about the bullet, about the attack. He was talking about something else, something deeper. "I am," she replied, her voice barely a whisper, but there was a quiet defiance in it. She didn't know why she said it, but something inside her stirred. She had been dead once, but now she was something more. Victor took a step closer, his shadow stretching across the room. "You're not dead, Elena. And you're not going anywhere. Not anymore." She didn't know what he wanted from her, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had just become far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. "You're supposed to be dead," said the Mafia boss. She replied, "I am." The sound of the heavy rain outside had become a dull hum against the windows, but inside the apartment, the air was still. Elena sat on the worn couch, her hands gripping the edge of the fabric, her mind spinning. She was alive. She should have been dead. Yet here she was, in this strange world she had never asked for. And there he was, Victor Moretti, the Mafia boss who had saved her life. But why? The question kept echoing in her mind as she stared at the door, half expecting him to walk in at any moment. Her pulse quickened when the sound of footsteps finally reached her ears. "Elena," Victor's voice called from the hallway, steady and commanding. "We need to talk." She stood up slowly, still unsure of what to make of this man who had turned her life upside down. She had tried to escape her past, to keep a low profile, to live a life as ordinary as she could after what happened to her. But everything had changed the moment she opened her eyes in that sterile room, surrounded by men in dark suits. Her eyes had locked with Victor's, and for the first time, she felt like something inside her had been pulled back to life. He was dangerous, of that she had no doubt. But there was something about him that made her heart race in a way she couldn't explain. And now, as he stepped into the room, his presence seemed to fill every corner of the space, commanding attention. His dark eyes met hers, and she felt as if he could see straight through her. He was always like this, unreadable, calculating. But there was a gentleness behind his gaze now, a softness that made her uneasy. "You don't have to say anything," he said, his tone more patient than she had expected. "But you need to understand something." She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to keep some distance between them. "What is that?" "I saved your life, Elena," he said, his voice low and controlled. "And I didn't do it just because I could. There's more to this than you think." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "You're a part of this now," Victor continued. "You're in my world whether you like it or not. And I protect what's mine." His words sent a chill down her spine. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No, you didn't," he agreed, his eyes softening ever so slightly. "But you're here now, and I don't intend to let anything happen to you. Not while you're under my care." She stepped back, her mind racing. Care? What did he mean by care? This wasn't some fairy tale where a mysterious stranger swept in to rescue the damsel in distress. This was reality, and she didn't trust anyone in this world. Especially not someone like him. "You don't know me," she said, her voice shaking just a little. "You don't know what I've been through." "I know more than you think," Victor replied, his voice never wavering. "I know what they did to you, and I know why they left you for dead." Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. How could he know that? Who was he really? "You can't protect me forever," she muttered, more to herself than to him. "I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to trust me," Victor said, his voice firm. "And I'm asking you to understand that your life, Elena, is worth more than you realize. It's worth more than you think." She shook her head, trying to push the overwhelming emotions away. "I don't need saving." "Maybe not," he said, taking a step closer. "But you'll need someone who can keep you safe." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded with meaning. Elena didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she could trust him, but part of her was drawn to him, pulled in by his calm confidence. There was something about him that made her feel like she wasn't alone anymore. Something about his presence made her feel like she mattered. But could she trust him? The door to her apartment creaked open, and Victor's expression shifted instantly. His gaze sharpened as he motioned for her to step back. "Stay here," he said, his tone darkening. "Don't move." Elena stood frozen in place, her eyes glued to him as he stepped outside. For the first time, she realized how far into this world she had already been dragged. There was no turning back now. She had no idea where this would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. "You're supposed to be dead," said the Mafia boss. She replied, "I am." The cold air of the night pressed in around Elena as she stood by the window, watching the rain fall in sheets, blurring the skyline of the city. She couldn't believe this was her life now. Not long ago, she had been just another face in the crowd, struggling to get by. But everything had changed since Victor Moretti, the Mafia boss, had saved her. She should have been dead. Her heart stopped in the street after. The bullet had torn through her chest. Yet here she was, alive, standing in his mansion, in his world. The world of power, danger, and secrets. Victor had told her she was safe now, that she was under his protection. But Elena wasn't sure what that meant. She hadn't asked for his help, hadn't asked to be dragged into his world. But the truth was, she couldn't escape it. She had no choice but to play along, at least for now. "Elena," Victor's voice cut through her thoughts, deep and commanding, like it always was. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his dark eyes locked on hers. "We need to talk." Elena swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. There was something about his presence that made her feel both safe and terrified. "About what?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Victor took a step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "About why you're here," he said simply, his voice like a low hum in the stillness of the room. "Why you're alive." Elena frowned. "I don't understand. You saved me, yes. But that doesn't explain." "I didn't save you out of kindness," Victor interrupted, his voice sharp now. "I saved you because you're important." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "Important? To who?" "To me," he replied, his voice softening just a little. "And to a lot of people who want you gone." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Gone?" she repeated, her mind racing. Who? What? Victor stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, as he closed the distance between them. You're a key player in a much bigger game, Elena, he said. I know you don't see it now, but you will. You can either be a part of it, or you can be its victim. Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. What game are you talking about? Victor's lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. A game where power is everything, where loyalty means survival, and where people like you, he paused, looking her up and down, are valuable. She stepped back, shaking her head. I don't want to be a part of your world, Victor. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't give you a choice, he said simply. But you will learn to play. You'll see that there's no other way out. Elena felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she swallowed it down. What was the point in arguing? She had no way to escape, no way to run. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Elena saw something flicker behind them, something cold, calculating. I want you to trust me, he said, and I want you to understand that you belong to me now. Elena recoiled, the words hitting her like a slap. I don't belong to anyone. Victor stepped forward again, his face inches from hers. You do now, he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. And you will never be free of me. She couldn't breathe. His words hung in the air like a threat, suffocating her. She wanted to run, to scream, but all she could do was stand there, frozen. He had saved her, yes. But in doing so, he had trapped her in a world of darkness, a world where there was no escape. Don't look so scared, he said softly, almost as if he were amused by her fear. You'll get used to it. You'll get used to me. Elena clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had no idea how she was going to survive this, but one thing was certain, she would never stop fighting. She might not be able to run, but she would never let herself be his pawn, not without a fight. You're supposed to be dead, said the Mafia boss. She replied, I am. Elena stared at Victor, her breath coming in shallow gasps as his words hung heavy in the air. You belong to me now, he had said, and despite the fear curling in her chest, there was something about his eyes that made her question whether that was really true. She tried to shake off the unease, the suffocating grip of his words, but they clung to her like a second skin. She wasn't his. She couldn't be. Yet here she was, standing in the mansion of a man who controlled everything around her. A man who had saved her life only to trap her in a world she didn't understand. A world of shadows, power, and secrets. His presence loomed behind her as she moved, his every step like a shadow following her own. She hated it. Hated the way her body responded to his presence. She hated the way he could make her feel safe one moment and terrified the next. But she couldn't deny the truth. She was in this world now. The game had already begun, and she had no choice but to play. The room felt colder as Victor's hand brushed against the back of her neck, his fingers lingering just long enough to send a shiver down her spine. You're not used to this, he said softly, almost as if reading her mind. But you'll learn. You'll learn how to survive. Elena bit her lip, refusing to acknowledge the flutter of something deep within her. She didn't need to learn. She didn't need him. She didn't need this world. But the way Victor spoke, the way he moved through the room like it was his domain, made her question everything she thought she knew about survival. I don't want to be part of this, she muttered, though the words came out weak, less certain than she had intended. Victor didn't react, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. You don't have a choice, he replied, his voice low and controlled, the power in his words undeniable. You were marked the moment you survived. You're a part of my world now, whether you like it or not. Elena's heart raced. She had never been the type to back down, never been the type to simply accept what was handed to her. But this was different. She was up against something far bigger than herself. The Mafia. A world she had only heard about in whispers, a world where lives meant nothing, where power ruled everything. She had seen the destruction it left behind, the bodies, the ruined lives. She had tried to stay out of it. She had tried to live a quiet life, away from the violence and chaos that lurked in the shadows. But now, the shadows had found her, and there was no escape. I don't belong here, Elena said, her voice trembling, though she tried to hide it. I didn't ask for this. Victor took a step closer, his eyes softening just the slightest, but there was still that coldness beneath the surface. I never asked for you to be here either, he said quietly, his voice almost gentle. But now that you are, you need to understand something. I protect what's mine. And you're mine, Elena. The words hit her like a punch to the gut, her chest tightening as she struggled to breathe. You don't own me, she spat, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. Victor's gaze never wavered. I do, he said simply, his voice unwavering. And you'll learn to accept it. The sooner you do, the easier this will be for you. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, anything, at him to make him understand that she didn't want this life. That she didn't want him. But there was a truth in his words that she couldn't escape. She was already in his world, already bound to him by something deeper than she could understand. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I want you to survive, he said, his tone serious now. I want you to understand the rules of this world. And I want you to trust me. Elena stared at him, her mind racing. Trust him? After everything he had done, after everything he was, how could she trust him? I can't trust you, she said, shaking her head. Not after everything. Victor's expression hardened, and for a moment, he looked like a different man. The mask of calm, composed power slipped, revealing something darker, something dangerous. You don't have a choice, he said, his voice low and cold. Trust me or not, it doesn't matter. You're in this now, and I'll make sure you stay alive long enough to see it through. Elena felt the weight of his words press down on her chest. She was in this now. She was trapped in his world, and there was no turning back. She could fight it, she could resist, but in the end, she knew it wouldn't matter. She would learn the rules. She would survive, or she would die trying. You're supposed to be dead, said the Mafia boss. She replied, I am. The mansion was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Elena stood by the window, staring out into the sprawling cityscape. The lights below twinkled like stars in a night sky, but none of them brought comfort. She felt more trapped than ever before. Victor Moretti had made it clear. She was part of his world now, whether she liked it or not. But what did that truly mean? He had saved her life, pulled her from the edge of death, and now he expected something in return. Her mind was racing. She didn't want to be a pawn in his game. She didn't want to owe him anything. But in his world, there was no such thing as freedom. Not for her. Not for anyone. She could feel his presence before he even entered the room. There was something about him, something undeniable, that made her body freeze in place. Victor was a force, not just physically but mentally. His very presence demanded respect, fear, and submission. Elena knew she couldn't escape it, at least not without facing consequences. He stepped into the room, his sharp gaze landing on her. You look lost, he said, his voice low and steady. She turned slightly, meeting his eyes but refusing to let him see the vulnerability she felt. I'm not lost, she replied, her voice a little stronger than she felt. Just trying to understand why I'm here. You're here because I saved you, he said simply, taking a step toward her. And now you're part of something bigger than you could ever imagine. Elena swallowed hard, her throat dry. She was tired of hearing that. I didn't ask for this, she said, shaking her head, frustration building in her chest. Victor stopped in front of her, his gaze intense. You don't need to ask for it. This is your reality now. You don't get to choose. And you need to accept that. His words hit her like a slap. She knew he was right. The moment she was pulled from the wreckage, her life had changed. She wasn't the same person anymore. But that didn't mean she had to like it. What do you want from me? Elena asked, her voice breaking slightly, a mixture of fear and anger. I want you to stop fighting me, Victor replied, his tone softening just a little. You're not in control anymore. But that doesn't mean you're helpless. I'll protect you, Elena. But you have to trust me. Elena stepped back, shaking her head again. Trust you? After everything. Victor's eyes darkened. You don't have a choice. You either trust me, or you don't survive. In my world, that's the only rule that matters. The word stung. She had been living on her own terms for so long. Now, she was at the mercy of a man whose world was built on power, control, and violence. But deep down, Elena knew he wasn't lying. Her survival depended on him. She couldn't deny that fact. I don't need your protection, she said, though it sounded weaker than she wanted it to. I didn't ask for it. Victor's expression softened just a fraction, and for the briefest moment, Elena saw something in his eyes, something that wasn't cold or calculating. Maybe it was pity, or maybe even concern. But before she could process it, the mask was back, and he was standing tall in front of her, his gaze unwavering. "You're part of my world now, Elena," he repeated. "And I will protect what's mine. No one touches you. No one hurts you. And if anyone dares to, they'll regret it." Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. There was no mistaking the seriousness in his voice. This wasn't a man who made idle threats. This was a man who acted on them. "You're not the same as the others," she said, more to herself than to him. Victor tilted his head, studying her. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," she admitted, shaking her head. I feel like I'm walking through a dream. Like none of this is real." Victor stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "This is real, Elena," he said, his voice low. "And you'll get used to it. You'll learn to see the world through my eyes. And when you do, you'll understand why I do the things I do." Elena didn't know how to respond. She didn't know if she ever would. But she also knew one thing for sure. She couldn't survive in this world alone. Not anymore. She didn't know what Victor's world was like, but it was the only world she had now. She could either learn to navigate it, or she could fall victim to it. And she wasn't ready to let that happen. "Not yet. You're supposed to be dead," said the Mafia boss. She replied, "I am." The heavy silence of the mansion hung in the air as Elena sat in the grand living room, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. It had been a week since Victor had made his claim. She was his. There was no way around it. No matter how hard she fought, no matter how many times she told herself she would never belong in his world, the truth was undeniable. She was already a part of it. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Elena looked up to see Victor walking towards her, his eyes unwavering as always. She had grown used to the way he commanded the room with just his presence. It wasn't even his stature, though he was tall and imposing. It was his power, his control over everything and everyone around him. She hated it. She hated that she felt small in his presence, like nothing more than a pawn in a game she didn't understand. But she had learned one thing over the past few days. In his world, survival meant adapting. And that was something she had always done, survived. "You're still angry," Victor said as he stood before her, his voice low and almost knowing. "Can you blame me?" Elena shot back, her voice sharp, though the words didn't feel as strong as she wanted them to. "You brought me into this world. You made me your possession." Victor didn't flinch. Instead, his lips curled into a faint smile. "I didn't make you anything. You've always been mine. You just didn't know it yet." Elena's pulse quickened at his words, but she held her ground. "I don't belong to anyone," she muttered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. "You do now," he replied, stepping closer. His gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "And you'll see that being mine is the only way you'll survive." Elena could feel the weight of his words. They weren't just a statement. They were a promise, one that she knew would be kept, no matter what it took. But even knowing that, she couldn't give in. She couldn't let him believe that she would just fall in line. Not when everything in her screamed to break free. "You think I need you to survive," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "But I don't. I never have." Victor's eyes darkened, a flicker of something dangerous passing through them. "You don't get to choose, Elena. In my world, you either accept the protection I offer, or you don't survive." His voice was cold, final, and Elena could feel the truth of it in her bones. She didn't want to admit it, but she knew he was right. The world she had been thrust into wasn't one that left room for weakness. In Victor's world, survival was a privilege, not a guarantee. But that didn't mean she had to like it. That didn't mean she had to accept it. "You can't control me," she said, her voice steady despite the way her heart raced. "I can do whatever I want." "You can try," he said softly, almost mockingly. "But you'll find that the more you fight, the less freedom you'll have. You'll learn to trust me. You'll learn to need me. And one day, you'll be thankful that I'm the one protecting you." Elena's eyes flashed with anger. "I don't need you. I never will." Victor stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he said, "You will. You just don't know it yet." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Elena alone in the silence. She sat there for a long time after he left, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. She didn't want to need him. She didn't want to be part of this world. But the more she fought, the more she realized that the lines between her old life and this new one were blurring. Victor was right about one thing. She was part of his world now. Whether she accepted it or not, she had already been marked. And as much as she hated it, she couldn't deny the truth. She was never going to escape him. Not now. Not ever. "You're supposed to be dead," said the Mafia boss. She replied, "I am." Elena stood by the grand window, her gaze fixed on the city that sprawled below her. The skyscrapers gleamed under the night sky, a world so distant from the one she had known. Her pulse still raced as the echoes of Victor's words lingered in her mind. "You're mine now." She hated it, but it was the truth. She had no choice anymore. Victor had made sure of that. The moment he saved her, the moment he pulled her from the jaws of death, her life was no longer her own. It belonged to him, and deep down, she knew there was no escaping him now. The room felt too big, too empty despite the luxury that surrounded her. The polished marble floors, the towering ceilings, the rich furniture, it was all meaningless. It might have been a different world, a world she could get used to, but it wasn't hers. Not yet, anyway. She wasn't ready to accept it. Yet, every day she spent here, with him, she felt herself sinking deeper into the life he had carved out for her. It wasn't just the luxury or the threats. It was the way he controlled everything, including her. She had been told she would learn, and whether she liked it or not, she was. Victor wasn't the type of man you ignored. His presence consumed everything, his power, his control. It was all-encompassing. Elena was starting to see the cracks in her resistance, the way his power wrapped around her like a vice, pulling her in even as she fought against it. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the way he held the world in his hands, or the way he made her feel like she could never escape it. That night, she had just finished her dinner, a solitary meal in the grand dining room. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the city barely audible through the thick walls. Elena wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, pushing her plate away. She felt restless, like she had been trapped in this gilded cage long enough. She couldn't just sit here, waiting. She had to do something. Her hand reached for her phone, and for a brief second, she thought about calling her old life. She wanted to hear a familiar voice, anyone who would remind her of the world she once knew. But she stopped. What was the point? She had burned those bridges when she accepted Victor's help. There was no going back. She put the phone down, staring at her reflection in the glass table. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger. She didn't recognize the look in her own eyes, the emptiness that had settled there. "You're getting soft," she whispered to herself. That was what Victor wanted, wasn't it? To break her down, make her weak, make her depend on him. She wouldn't let him do that. Not completely. She wasn't sure how, but she had to find a way out of this. But how could she win? Victor had every angle covered. When he had people everywhere, watching her, controlling every step she took. The sound of the door opening behind her brought her back to the present. She didn't have to turn around to know it was him. "You're still restless," Victor said, his voice a low murmur in the otherwise quiet room. Elena didn't respond. She wasn't sure what she could say anymore. "You think you can leave?" Victor continued, stepping into her line of sight. His eyes locked onto hers with that piercing intensity. "You can't, Elena. Not now. Not ever." The weight of his words crashed over her like a tidal wave. It wasn't the first time he had said something like this, but this time, it felt different. This time, the finality in his voice made her stomach drop. She wanted to argue, wanted to fight back, but the truth hung in the air between them, suffocating her. She was his, and there was no escaping. "I don't want to be your prisoner," Elena finally said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "Then stop fighting me," Victor replied, his tone softening just a touch. "You're mine now, Elena. You don't have to fight it. You never did." Elena swallowed hard, the anger rising in her chest. "You don't control me," she spat. Victor's expression didn't change. He simply stood there, watching her, as if he had expected this reaction. "I already do." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. She felt the air in the room grow heavier as he drew near, as though he could reach out and suffocate her with his power. "You can resist all you want, but in the end, you'll learn to trust me. You'll learn to need me. I'll never need you." Elena shot back, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "I'm not like the others." Victor's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You think you're different, but you're not. You'll see. Soon enough, you'll understand why you belong to me." Elena stepped back, her mind racing. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from him, but she knew it was pointless. There was nowhere to go. She was trapped. Victor reached out and gently touched her chin, lifting her face to meet his gaze. I told you, Elena. You're mine. And one day, you'll be thankful for that. Elena's heart hammered in her chest as his words sank in. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep fighting this. His power was overwhelming, suffocating. It had already started to break her down, piece by piece. The more she tried to resist, the more she realized just how far she was falling into his world. You're supposed to be dead, said the Mafia boss. She replied, I am. The days had blurred together for Elena, each one passing in a haze of quiet tension. She was still trying to convince herself that she could leave, that she could escape the web Victor Moretti had woven around her. But each day, his words rang in her ears, louder, clearer, until they became impossible to ignore. You're mine, he had said, and deep down, she knew it was true. Every time she looked at him, every time their paths crossed, there was no denying the power he held over her. She had fought it at first, refusing to give in to the life he was offering her. But now, as she sat in the opulent living room, the weight of her own resistance felt futile. She was here. She was a part of his world. And no matter how much she wanted to fight it, she couldn't escape. The mansion, once foreign to her, had become her prison. She had learned to stay silent, to blend into the shadows, as Victor's world continued to spin around her. But something had shifted. She was no longer just a bystander. The longer she stayed, the more she found herself drawn into his world, his plans. Victor had made it clear that her place was with him, and slowly, she had begun to understand that her survival depended on adapting to his ways. It wasn't just about obedience. It was about trust. Trust that he would keep her safe. Trust that he would protect her from the dangers of the world he controlled. As much as she hated to admit it, she couldn't ignore the fact that Victor's world was the only one in which she had a chance to survive. That night, Elena found herself standing at the top of the grand staircase, her hand gripping the railing as she stared down at the lavish ballroom below. It was another one of Victor's gatherings, a display of power and wealth that he hosted whenever he felt the need to remind the world of his dominance. The guests milled about, each conversation laced with the same polished superficiality that Elena had come to expect from Victor's circle. But tonight, something felt different. Her presence, once a quiet shadow in the background, now felt more significant. She had been placed in this world by Victor, but for the first time, she felt like she belonged in it. The realization made her stomach turn. She had spent so long running from this life, telling herself that she would never be like the others, never fall into the trap of power and greed that defined Victor's world. Yet here she was, standing on the edge, watching it all unfold. Victor's voice cut through her thoughts, drawing her attention. Elena, he called, his tone smooth, commanding. She turned to find him standing at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes locking with hers. There was something in the way he looked at her now, something different. It wasn't the cold, calculating gaze he usually wore. It was softer, almost expectant. Come down here, he said, his voice a little quieter, more personal than usual. Elena hesitated for only a moment before she descended the stairs, each step bringing her closer to him. As she reached the bottom, Victor extended his hand to her, a silent invitation. She took it, her fingers brushing against his, and felt a spark of something she couldn't name. He led her into the center of the room, where the guests had gathered. The crowd parted slightly as they moved through, their eyes falling on them with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Elena had never been the center of attention in Victor's world, but tonight, she was. She felt all the eyes on her, felt the weight of their expectations, but for the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt empowering. Victor stopped in the middle of the room, turning to face her. This is your place now, he said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. You belong here with me. Elena's heart raced, her thoughts spinning. She had never wanted this, never wanted to be a part of this world. But now, standing in the heart of it, she couldn't deny that there was a part of her that was beginning to understand it. She wasn't just a victim in his game. She was a player. I don't want to be a pawn, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something real in his gaze. You're not a pawn, he said, his voice steady. You're my queen. The words hit Elena like a shockwave, and for the first time, she didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure if she should be scared, relieved, or something else entirely. But before she could speak, Victor raised her hand, guiding her into a slow dance. The music played softly around them, the world outside fading into the background. It was just them now, caught in the rhythm of the moment. She felt the heat of his body against hers, felt the steady pulse of his heartbeat through his hand as it rested on her back. And for the first time since she had entered his world, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was no longer fighting it. She was becoming a part of it. As the music swirled around them, Elena realized that she might never escape Victor's world. But for now, in this moment, she didn't want to. She was his, whether she liked it or not. And for the first time, she didn't feel entirely powerless. You're supposed to be dead, said the Mafia boss. She replied, I am. The night had settled into a heavy silence, broken only by the faint hum of city traffic far below. Elena sat in the plush chair by the window, staring out at the skyline, her mind racing. She had danced with Victor, surrendered to the moment, but deep down, she still couldn't shake the feeling that this was a game, one she wasn't sure she wanted to play. Her world had become a whirlwind of confusion, wrapped in the luxury and danger that Victor brought with him. She wanted to push it all away, to tell herself that she could walk away from this, but the reality was that she couldn't. She had no place to go. The world Victor had dragged her into was a trap, and there was no escaping it. The cold air from the window felt refreshing against her skin, but it didn't do anything to quiet the storm brewing inside her. She was caught, and as much as she hated to admit it, she was starting to realize that she was beginning to need him. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the thought. It wasn't just his protection, his power, it was something else. Something about him made her feel alive in ways she had forgotten. She couldn't deny the pull he had on her. The way he looked at her, the way he touched her, even when he wasn't speaking, it all had a weight to it. Victor had given her life back, but at what cost? The cost of her freedom, of her autonomy. The cost of becoming something she had never imagined she would be. You're mine, he had said. And somehow, she was starting to understand that it wasn't just a statement, it was a promise. A dark, binding promise. As if on cue, the door to her room opened, and Victor stepped in. He was dressed in his usual tailored suit, his expression unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes. Something more intense, more personal. You've been thinking again, he said, his voice low, almost as if he knew exactly what was going on in her mind. Elena didn't answer. She just continued to stare out the window, her heart beating faster now. It's not a choice, Elena, he continued, stepping closer. You know that, right? She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. I never asked for any of this, she said quietly, her voice tinged with frustration. You don't need to ask for it, Victor replied calmly, almost like he was stating a fact. This is the way things are now. You're mine, and there's nothing you can do to change it. His words hit her like a punch to the gut, but she didn't back down. I don't want to be your possession, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Victor's lips curved into a small smile, but it wasn't a kind one. You're not my possession, he said, his tone cool. You're my partner. And partners protect each other. But first, you have to trust me. Elena's eyes narrowed. Trust you, she repeated, her voice rising. How can I trust you after everything? After you took everything from me? Victor's expression softened, but only just. I didn't take anything from you, Elena. I gave you a chance to live. I gave you a place in my world. And you can choose to fight it, or you can accept it. But either way, you're in this now. You're part of me. You're mine, and I will protect you. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that she didn't need his protection, that she didn't need him. But the words died in her throat. She had to admit, he was right. She had no choice anymore. She was in this world, and there was no turning back. You don't understand, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I never wanted this. I never asked for any of it. Victor stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You don't need to ask for it, he said, his voice soft but firm. You're mine now, and you will learn to accept it. His words rang in her ears, filling her mind with doubt and confusion. Elena didn't want to accept it. She didn't want to belong to him. But no matter how hard she tried to fight it, no matter how many times she told herself she could walk away, she knew the truth. She was already a part of his world. The longer she stayed, the more she realized that she would have to adapt to survive. I'm not like the others, Elena said, her voice barely audible. I won't become like them. Victor studied her for a moment, then slowly shook his head. You don't have to become like anyone else, he said, his voice almost gentle. You just have to become yourself, your true self. And that means accepting what you are in this world. Elena's heart raced as she took in his words. And what am I in this world? She asked, her voice trembling. You're mine, he said simply, his gaze never leaving hers. And you'll learn to embrace it. Elena stood there in the silence, her mind spinning with the weight of his words. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could ever truly accept this life, this world. But for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to fight it anymore. For better or for worse, she was his. And that was a reality she couldn't escape. You're supposed to be dead, said the Mafia boss. She replied, I am. The days had blurred together. In Victor's mansion, each one more suffocating than the last. Elena had tried to convince herself she was still in control, that she could walk away at any moment, but deep down, she knew the truth. There was no walking away from Victor Moretti. Not now. Not ever. Her life, as much as she hated to admit it, was bound to his. The thought gnawed at her every waking moment, but she couldn't shake the fact that his world had become her world. She had learned to walk the fine line between being his ally and his prisoner, playing the role he expected of her while hiding the part of herself that still longed for freedom. But as the days passed, her resistance was slowly eroded. The luxury, the attention, the power, it all wrapped itself around her like a cocoon. And slowly, she was changing, whether she liked it or not. Tonight, the house felt quieter than usual. The guests had all left, and the only sounds were the distant hum of the city and the soft tick of the clock in the hallway. Elena stood by the grand window, staring out at the darkened skyline, lost in thought. She was trapped, yes, but for the first time, she wondered if maybe she had chosen this life. Or maybe it had chosen her. She wasn't sure anymore. You look deep in thought. Victor's voice pulled her from her reverie, his presence as imposing as ever. She turned, meeting his gaze, and for a moment, she saw something different in his eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there, something softer. She wasn't sure what it meant, but it made her pulse quicken. Just thinking, she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. About what? He asked, his voice low and serious as he took a step toward her. Elena hesitated. She could lie, tell him it was nothing, but the truth was, she wasn't sure herself. About us, she said softly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Victor's gaze sharpened, and he tilted his head, studying her closely. And what about us? She swallowed hard. I don't know, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. I guess I'm just trying to figure out where I fit into your world. Victor took another step closer, his presence overwhelming. You fit perfectly, he said, his voice calm, almost reassuring. You always have. His words sent a shiver down her spine. She wanted to argue, to remind him that she had never asked for any of this, that she wasn't some part of his plan. But as she looked into his eyes, the fight drained from her. Maybe she was a part of his world now. Maybe there was no escaping it. I never wanted this, she said quietly, almost to herself. I never asked to be a part of this life. Victor's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained intense. You don't have to want it, Elena. You don't have to understand it. But it's your reality now. And the sooner you accept it, the easier it will be for you. Elena wanted to scream, to run, but the weight of his words kept her still. She could feel the truth of them sinking in. She was already in too deep. She had made the choice, whether she had realized it or not. I don't know if I can accept this, she said, her voice cracking slightly. Victor reached out, his hand brushing her cheek with a tenderness that took her by surprise. You'll learn to, Elena, he said, his tone gentle now. In time, you'll see that everything I've done has been to protect you, to keep you safe. Safe, Elena repeated, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. Is that what you call this? Keeping me locked up in this house, keeping me under your thumb? It's not like that, Victor said, his voice firm now. You're safe here. Safer than you would be out there. He gestured vaguely toward the world beyond the walls of the mansion, the world that Elena had once known. Out there, there's nothing but danger. You wouldn't last a week on your own. Elena felt the sting of his words, but they were not without truth. She knew that she had been living on the edge for years, surviving by her wits, but never truly safe. Not in the way Victor's world promised safety. It was a different kind of protection, a different kind of security. "And what do I owe you for this protection?" she asked, her voice flat. Victor didn't hesitate. "You owe me nothing, Elena," he said, his eyes darkening. "But there are those who will come for you. You don't understand the game yet, but you will. And when that time comes, you'll be ready. You'll be ready because you belong with me." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, though the words felt weak as they left her lips. Victor's gaze softened for a moment, but only a moment. "You do now," he said simply. "And that's not something you can change." The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Elena knew he was right, and that terrified her more than anything. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong to him. But for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could leave. And somehow, that thought felt more like a prison than the mansion ever had. "You're supposed to be dead," said the Mafia boss. She replied, "I am." The days seemed to blur together as Elena continued to settle into the life that Victor had crafted for her. Every corner of the mansion, every word he spoke, reminded her of how deeply she was entwined in his world. She was no longer just a guest, no longer just a bystander. She was part of this, whether she liked it or not. At first, she had resisted, convinced that there was some way to escape this life he had pulled her into. But with each passing day, the walls of her resistance crumbled further. She had never wanted to belong to anyone, let alone a man like Victor Moretti. Yet, here she was, surrounded by wealth and power that she never asked for, and somehow, she had grown accustomed to it. The idea of escape seemed increasingly impossible. Elena stood in front of the mirror that morning, running her fingers through her hair, her eyes searching her reflection. The woman staring back at her was different from the one who had first entered Victor's world. She had changed. She could no longer deny it. The longer she stayed, the more she felt herself bending to the will of this life. The mansion, once foreign and intimidating, now felt oddly familiar. She knew the hallways, the rooms, the routines. She had learned the game, whether she wanted to or not. And Victor, with his quiet authority, had become a constant in her life. It was hard to separate the man from the power he wielded. Everything about him was calculated, controlled. His eyes saw everything, and she was no exception. There was nowhere to hide, no place to run. Not that she wanted to. Deep down, Elena knew that there was something in Victor's world she had come to rely on, something she couldn't quite define. Maybe it was the security he offered, or the way he made her feel like she mattered in a world that had once felt so empty. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Elena," Victor's voice called, low and smooth. She turned, her heart skipping a beat at the sound of his voice. "Come here." She hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the door. As she opened it, Victor stood on the other side, his eyes locking with hers. There was something different in his expression today, softer, more intense. "We need to talk," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Elena's stomach tightened. "About what?" she asked, her heart racing in her chest. "About where we're going," he replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "About you." Elena frowned, trying to steady her nerves. "What do you mean?" Victor took a step closer, his presence filling the room, as always. "You've been resisting this," he said, his voice calm, as though he were stating a fact. "But you're mine, Elena, and you're going to learn to accept that." She stepped back slightly, her chest tightening. "I don't want to accept it," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I didn't ask for any of this." Victor's expression darkened, and for a moment, she saw something shift in his eyes, a glimmer of something dangerous. "It doesn't matter what you asked for," he said softly, his voice still smooth, but carrying an edge now. "You're mine, and that's not going to change." Elena felt the weight of his words, like a chain around her neck that she couldn't escape from. "I'm not your possession," she whispered, the words shaky but firm. "I never will be." Victor smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. "You already are," he said, his tone soft but final. "You just haven't realized it yet." Elena wanted to argue, to fight back, but she knew it was pointless. She had heard these words before. She had fought against them, but now they felt like the truth. She was already in his world, already part of his plans. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't walk away. I don't know how you do it, she said, her voice breaking slightly. How you make me feel like I have no choice. Victor's eyes softened just a touch, but his words were as firm as ever. Because you don't, Elena, he said. You belong to me, and you'll come to accept that. In time. Elena turned away, trying to escape the weight of his gaze, but Victor stepped forward, gently cupping her chin and tilting her head back to meet his eyes. Don't fight it, he murmured. You're exactly where you need to be. His words sent a shiver down her spine. She hated how they made her feel. How they made her feel like she was becoming someone else, someone she didn't recognize. But deep down, a part of her wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe she had been running from this world for too long, and maybe it was time to stop. You'll learn to trust me, Victor said, his voice low, almost coaxing. I will protect you. I'll always keep you safe. The words echoed in her mind, like a twisted lullaby. Safe? She repeated, her voice hollow. You think this is safety? Victor nodded, his grip tightening on her chin. I do, he said simply. This is as safe as you're going to get. This is the world you were always meant to be a part of. Elena's mind reeled. She wanted to scream, to reject everything he was saying, but she couldn't. The more she tried to fight it, the more she realized that maybe she wasn't meant to escape after all. Maybe she was meant to stay, to learn, to be a part of this life. I don't want this, she said quietly, the words feeling like a lie even as they left her lips. But you will, Victor whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. Because you're mine. And for the first time, Elena didn't fight him. You're supposed to be dead, said the Mafia boss. She replied, I am. Elena stood in the dimly lit hallway, her breath shallow, her heart pounding in her chest. It had been weeks since she had been forced to accept Victor's world, weeks since she had let herself slip further into the life she never wanted. Yet here she was, standing on the edge, her body still fighting the reality that she was trapped in a game where there was no escaping. She had become a part of Victor Moretti's empire, whether she liked it or not. At first, the power, the control, the wealth, it had all seemed so distant, something that could never belong to her. But now, it felt like it was in her blood, like she couldn't live without it. She hated how much of him had already seeped into her, how much of him she had allowed herself to become. She couldn't pretend anymore that she wasn't a part of this world. But tonight felt different. She had been forced to confront something deeper, something she hadn't wanted to face. She had been walking the thin line between submission and rebellion, trying to retain some semblance of control. But now, as she stood in the hallway, she realized that the line was gone. She had crossed it a long time ago, and there was no turning back. She had become part of Victor's world, and whether she liked it or not, she had learned to embrace it. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Elena's heart skipped a beat. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. Victor's presence was unmistakable. He was like a shadow that followed her every move, a constant reminder of the hold he had on her life. Elena, he called softly, his voice carrying through the silence. She didn't answer, though she could feel his eyes on her, studying her every reaction. He stopped just behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, but far enough that she couldn't read his expression. You've been quiet, he said, his voice calm, but there was something darker in it, something that made Elena's stomach tighten. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything between them hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I've been thinking, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. About what? About us, she replied, her voice faltering for just a second. About how much I've changed since I met you. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. And what have you realized? Elena swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. I've realized that I've become a part of your world, she said, her voice steady, despite the way her hands trembled. And that scares me. Victor's lips curled into a small smile, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a knowing smile, one that sent a shiver down her spine. It should scare you, he said, his voice low. But it's too late for fear, Elena. You're mine now. Elena's pulse quickened at his words, and for a moment, she wanted to argue. She wanted to fight back, to scream at him that she wasn't his, that she didn't belong here. But deep down, she knew the truth. She belonged to him. She had belonged to him from the moment he saved her. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Victor's gaze softened, Just a little. I want you to stop fighting, he said, his tone almost gentle. I want you to accept that this is your life now. There's no running from it. Elena closed her eyes, her chest tightening. She wanted to reject him, to push him away, but the words wouldn't come. She was tired. She was tired of fighting a battle she couldn't win. And so, for the first time, she stopped resisting. She stopped fighting. She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had saved her. The man who had claimed her as his own. And for the first time, she saw not just the power, the danger, but something else. Something she couldn't explain. Something that made her feel like she wasn't just a pawn in his game. She was someone important. To him. I'll never be the woman you want me to be, Elena said, her voice steady now, her resolve hardening. But I'll learn. I'll learn to live in your world, on my terms. Victor's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Elena thought he might snap, might remind her of just how much power he had over her. But instead, he nodded slowly. Good, he said quietly. That's exactly what I want to hear. Elena stood there, her heart still racing, but something had shifted. For the first time, she didn't feel completely helpless. She had accepted it. She had accepted him. She was no longer just a victim in this world. She was a player. And for better or for worse, she would learn. To survive. She would learn to thrive in this world of power, danger, and shadows. She would make her place in it, even if it meant becoming someone she never thought she would be. Victor reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. You're mine, he said softly. And you always will be. Elena didn't pull away. She didn't argue. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to make this work. A way to survive. And in this world, survival was all that mattered. In this captivating dark romance, Elena finds herself trapped in a world that is both dangerous and alluring, drawn into the powerful hands of Victor Moretti. Once a victim of fate, she has no choice but to navigate the dangerous game of survival in a life she never asked for. From the moment Victor saves her life, Elena is entangled in a web of power, control, and dark secrets, her fate forever changed. As their dark romance unfolds, Elena struggles to retain her identity while learning to accept her place in Victor's world. With each passing day, the pull between them grows stronger, leaving Elena questioning everything she thought she knew about power, trust, and love. Through the twists and turns of this dark romance, Elena must decide if she can fight for her freedom or if she will succumb to the world that Victor has drawn her into. The intensity of their connection tests the boundaries of love and control, with Victor relentlessly proving that in this world, survival depends on submission. Can Elena break free from the confines of her dark romance? Or is she bound to a life that she never imagined? The tension between Elena and Victor escalates as their complex relationship pushes them both to their limits. With danger lurking at every corner and emotions running high, this dark romance keeps you on the edge of your seat. As Elena learns to navigate this treacherous new life, she must confront her deepest fears and desires, ultimately discovering whether she can embrace or escape the dark romance that has consumed her. Don't miss the journey into this intense and enthralling dark romance that explores the depths of power, trust, and survival.